Okay, so we're going to continue our look at standard lighting by looking at shadows. So right here I have rendered just a still image with 4 pyramids with a transparent material and then the different shadow types. So for the first shadow, I put advanced ray trace. The second one, we have area shadows, which give a real nice fall off. The third one, shadow maps. And then the fourth one, the Raytrace Shadow. Not the advanced, but the Raytrace Shadow. And the Raytrace Shadow is the only one that accepts the transparency. So if we look in the viewport, it looks like all of them have transparency. But when we come in and we zoom in on these, you'll see that the only one that does is the Raytrace Shadow. So when I click on this light, Raytrace Shadow. If you need transparency, you do want to use the Raytrace Shadow. So we will take a look at these different shadow types and what the differences are between them. Okay, so here I have the same 4 shadow types that we just looked at. I just made the object solid and a pinkish color. And we're just going to take a look at some of the parameters between these objects. So the first one we're actually going to look at is the area shadow. So unlike the others that have a very hard edge to it, the area gives you a nice blurred edge. And with this, we'll look at the area shadow parameters. We can control the quality of this with our quality setting here. So if you notice, there's a little bit of, let's zoom in, a little bit of noise around that shadow. So let's take the quality up to 15 and the integrity up to 5 and render that out. And you'll see we get a much smoother fall off on our shadow. So we can play with that. Shadow bias is how far from the base we get the shadow. So let's move this up quite a bit. And see if we can get it to separate. So I'm just going to move my angle a little bit. And now you see that the shadow no longer matches the base of it. So we've scooted the shadow over a bit. And this is actually handy when your shadow feels like it's not seated properly against your object. So in this case, it seats fine, but if the shadow feels like it's overlapped, you can make an adjustment to the shadow bias. The next shadow we're going to look at is our shadow maps. So if we click here, we'll see we have shadow maps. And then within the parameters for the shadow maps, we have the bias. So again, we're just going to frame to this one. Take a render. You see the map. And I can adjust the bias, and you see it will move over. Let's do a greater amount. And you see we get that movement on the shadow. So I'll bring that back to 0. And then this is the shadow map, how it's generated. With the shadow map we have samples. It's actually drawing out the shadow, and it's looking at the angle of the light where the shadow should be drawn. And then it's using 512 samples by default. So if I bring this down to 10 samples and then render, now you can see how broken up the map is. It's unable to generate that sample. So we'll go up to 100. Now we're getting this shadow pretty well, but the fall off on it is not generating. And we'll go up to about 250. And here you go, you can see each scan line.